From the heights of the heavens, he brought down the ice crest of explosion, and a flurry of ice shards immediately flew across the ground, instantly splitting the ground around the figure in dark armor. Meanwhile, the gray-haired old man with a long beard raised his palm to the sky and said that he had been waiting for this moment for a whole century, as if about to release a long-held spell. Then the same sage stood on a cliff under the crescent moon and claimed that the Demon King was called the strongest being in the world, while in the haze behind him a horned silhouette loomed. After this, the elderly sorcerer stepped forward and declared himself a great sage, demanding to decide once and for all which of them was truly superior to the other. However, a glowing magic circle suddenly flared up in front of him, and a clawed hand emerged from the light. He froze, realizing that he had encountered something unknown. Meanwhile, an ominous shadow with a dull voice declared that human strength was insignificant compared to its power, and a smaller silhouette hovered slightly above, warily watching what was happening. The fair-haired mage noticed the symbols on the ground and assumed that this was reincarnation magic, after which he wondered if his opponent intended to travel to the future. Then the bearded old man objected that trying to use such illusory magic without any certainty of success was recklessness. In response, the dark ruler with blazing eyes proclaimed that he would put an end to everything with his own hands, calling the world pathetic and filled with fools. After this, the gray-haired sorcerer clenched his fist and declared that he had dedicated his entire life to magic in order to defeat the enemy and prove his superiority. The determined mage placed his palm on the ground and swore that he would not allow the Demon King to escape. Then the elder, kneeling in the shining circle, firmly declared that he would never retreat. Moreover, he vowed to defeat the enemy, even if it meant sacrificing everything he had worked for over the past 100 years. After these words, he thought about the magic of reincarnation, realizing that he was putting his own life on the line by putting the last of his power into the ritual. Soon, the baby in the blue blanket began to cry, and an inner voice announced that the rebirth had taken place, transporting him 500 years into the future. Thus, Ren Strain, the eldest son of the Strain family, appeared, holding the soft glow in his palm and quietly uttering the word, light. A tiny figure flashed in the reflection of his eye, and then memory told him that he had once been a great sage, born into the noble house of Strachey. However, looking at the glowing ball in his hand, he realized that the price of reincarnation had been high, and now his magic had weakened to a modest level. Meanwhile, a peaceful city lay beneath the cloudy sky, and the thought that the Demon King might also have been reincarnated haunted him. And finally, the dark silhouette reflected on the fact that his eternal enemy had probably also lost his former power, but at the same time, he did not rule out the possibility that one day he would gain strength superior to anything he had possessed in his past life. He pondered his need to regain his lost strength and master the magic of the current era as quickly as possible. A magic circle flickered before his eyes, and the silhouette of a dragon seemed to loom nearby, urging him to take decisive action. However, his thoughts then turned to his parents. He did not understand why they stubbornly did not teach him witchcraft, while his mother warned him about the dangers of the so-called brain method, and his father referred to an important book and refused access to the library. Then the young heir involuntarily noted to himself that such guardianship seemed excessive and was beginning to restrict his freedom. Suddenly he shuddered, letting out a quiet cry as an anxious voice came from far away, persistently calling for Ren. The mother looked around worriedly and asked if it was starting again in such a place, and at that moment someone quietly said her name, increasing the tension. After this, she gently called her son to dinner, adding that Eliza was with them today, while he explained that he was just taking a walk, taking advantage of the good weather. Meanwhile, another thought was taking shape in his head. It was necessary to create conditions under which he could secretly study magic. Later, already at the table, he asked Eliza if she was feeling well today, and she looked at him with slight surprise. Then the sister happily announced that, thanks to the medicine he had given her the day before, she had felt much better, and therefore she was happy to share a meal with him again after a long break. Then he gently stroked her head, and she laughed cheerfully, and he noticed that he was glad of her cheerfulness. After this, he was overcome by a thought. In his past life, he had always been alone, so he still had not had time to get used to the warmth of a family. Meanwhile, the eldest daughter of the Strain family, HAREM, reminded Ren that the care of Eliza was her responsibility, and someone added that he was taking it upon himself again. In response, Eliza flushed and asked if he was thinking of objecting to her, while the young man calmly remarked that it did not matter who exactly was caring for her. At the dinner table, HAREM was reprimanded by her father for her inappropriate manners, while the three girls sat quietly, one of them looking down and not intervening. Then Graham, the representative of the Strain family, asked HAREM with friendly interest about the Magic Academy and whether she had won first place in the entrance exam. She confidently declared that there was no magician stronger than her in the academy, confirming her words with a beaming smile. Afterwards, the man enthusiastically remarked how impressive it was, and the girl remained calm, pleased with the praise. The mother explained that their father did not possess magic at all, but the interlocutor laughed and said that HAREM was a talented sorceress like her, and therefore the Strain family was not in any danger. Meanwhile, Eliza confidently announced her intention to one day become a worthy head of the family, following her older sister's example as heir. And finally, Ren thought that, unlike Eliza, HAREM was arrogant, but her abilities were probably truly great, since she was studying at the most prestigious magic academy in the country. He turned to his mother with a request, and she asked in surprise why it suddenly sounded so unexpected. The young heir then enthusiastically asked to be allowed to begin studying magic, adding that the time was now right for him. After this, he recalled that their parents considered them too young, although Aramni, who was almost his age, had been taught witchcraft by her mother much earlier. However, the woman suggested returning to this conversation later, and the father supported her, noting that next time the three of them, he, she, and their son, would discuss everything calmly. Then the head of the family ordered that Leneliza be sent to her room. The boy replied that he understood, and the girl remained silently at the table, listening. Meanwhile, a suspicion was growing in the young man's mind. What was happening seemed more than just excessive care, as if they were deliberately hiding something important from him. Later, he was standing at the door when he was reminded to remember to take his medication, and he briefly confirmed that he would do so. At that moment, he turned around, noticing that he had been called. Eliza was standing in front of him, her hands on her hips, and asked him to stay for a minute. Then his sister sharply declared that it was premature to think about magic for someone as incapable as he was, and suggested abandoning the idea, allowing his father to teach him fencing. However, Eliza immediately objected that it was impossible to know the outcome without trying, and he involuntarily thought about her words. After this, she added that her mother and father were worried and still had not revealed the whole truth to them. Then one of them firmly declared that the truth would still be told, approaching and emphasizing his determination. Eliza confidently stated that a man, by nature, is not capable of using magic. The mother explained that witchcraft was a special power available only to women, and in confirmation, streams of magical energy swirled around her, reflecting on other female figures. Someone hesitated, then noted that it was enough to look at their family for everything to become obvious. Eliza explained that the head of the Strain family is their mother, and their father, despite his talent, cannot use magic himself, since men are deprived of this ability. He was amazed by this statement and objected that he was able to cast spells himself, despite the mistrust of those around him. She thought about her previous evasiveness and compared it with her parents' behavior, as if trying to put together missing pieces of a puzzle. Meanwhile, Eliza realized that HAREM relied too much on her and understood why she was looked down upon. Everything pointed to an era where magic exalted women. Finally, the mother sternly warned her son if he really understood everything, then he should no longer talk about wanting to study magic, since the incapable will remain so, and she intends to keep him under her control for the rest of his life. He was filled with irritation, despite all the inner feeling of maturity, as if he had grown up in a different era. He was treated like an unreasonable child, and the ridicule hurt especially deeply, because deep down he still considered himself a sage. She crossed her arms over her chest and asked doubtfully what kind of training they were talking about, while he calmly suggested meeting tomorrow and checking everything out in practice. After this, the young man smiled confidently and asked not to interfere with his learning of magic, adding that if he won the duel, the dispute would be finally settled. Eliza laughed loudly and declared that he would have to experience the lesson on his own body, clearly amused by what was happening. Then she looked at him firmly and told him to get ready, as if already anticipating the outcome. The mother watched this with a gentle smile and remarked that she was glad of his appearance, as she had expected that he might evade. Then he said with a touch of bravado that it would be a disgrace to the family if the future head of the clan, Alam's sister, were to lose to him in a fair fight. After that, he cheerfully asked to demonstrate her signature spell, and Eliza, instantly pulling herself together, promised to crush him completely. Meanwhile, a girl's anxious cry was heard nearby, and the adults behind her turned their gaze in the direction indicated. She then called the boy again as they both watched the events unfold with intent attention, still holding their chopsticks. The next second, Eliza activated the fire spear, and a flaming projectile rushed forward. He couldn't help but notice that for someone her age, her mastery of such a spell was impressive. Even though it was a basic technique, the power in it was significant, and now it became clear why Alam was proud of herself. Then one of those present, clutching a racket, announced that he had been saving up his strength for 6 years for the demonstration of the squall of consecutive wind waves, which he intended to show for the first time in a long time. The young man became wary when he heard the explanation that this barrage could be repelled with a simple defensive barrier, and he realized that his previous self-confidence could turn into defeat. He hurried to his sister, anxiously asking if she was okay, while she was breathing heavily and could barely stand on her feet from fatigue. However, a moment later she animatedly praised him for such a large-scale spell, admitting that she had never seen anything like it before, and he scratched the back of his head in confusion. With an awkward smile, he admitted that he had been sneaking a peek at the spellbook, and Eliza, with a large bow on her back, asked in surprise how he had managed it. At that very moment, Ren's parents called out to him in alarm, and there was clear concern in their voices. The father realized that the boy had just used magic, and he calmly confirmed the fact. Eliza asked in amazement if he could cast spells simply by reading a book, and he quietly replied in the affirmative, although deep down he knew he had only uttered a version of the truth that was convenient for everyone. The father exclaimed in amazement that a man capable of using magic was something incredible, while the mother explained that the spell demonstrated earlier belonged to a rare mid-level technique, the flurry of consecutive wind strikes. He tried to object, calling the technique suitable even for beginners, but she calmly added that with due practice, anyone can master it, regardless of gender. Suddenly, both mother and son cried out in confusion, and the father quickly declared that it was impossible, his gaze involuntarily lingering on the top of Eliza's head, as if searching for an explanation. The young man realized with shock that the problem was not only that men were supposedly incapable of magic, but also that the very difficulty of using it was excessive for them. Meanwhile, a clear sky spread out over the tranquil city, and an inner voice reflected on how, over the past 500 years, the very understanding of magic had changed beyond recognition, wondering why everything had come to this state. The narrative then clarified that 5 centuries had indeed passed in this world, and that men were now barred from witchcraft. He looked up, eyes wide as the staff in his hand began to crumble, the thought of magic failing becoming especially clear. After that, he plunged headlong into the books, noticing the same words about the degradation of magical art, while symbols and a staff hovered around him, as if confirming what he had read. He wondered why he was the only one able to use the power, albeit with difficulty, and attributed it to reincarnation, while also admitting that the Demon King might be behind it all. At that moment, his mother quietly apologized, standing by the bookshelf, and he looked up at her attentively from his place. She admitted that she had not previously revealed the whole truth about magic, considering it too cruel for a child in his early years. She then added softly that Ren probably had a special gift that no one else had. After that, she gently took him by the shoulders and said that if he still wanted to learn, he would have to put aside his doubts and pave his own way. The mother also emphasized that there was nothing more for him outside the magic book, and they were not able to teach him further. He whispered in confusion that this couldn't be true, as if trying to cling to his last hope. Then it became clear in his thoughts. The plan to quickly master new spells and become stronger had collapsed, and now there was only one way out: to rely solely on himself. Suddenly he raised his head when someone's hand touched his arm, and words were heard that there was still one possibility. A majestic building appeared before his mind's eye, and a voice explained that upon reaching the age of 15, he should enroll in the Elenia Magic Academy. He asked doubtfully whether a young man like him would be able to get into the same academy where Alam-san was studying. His mother calmly explained that the academy had no gender restrictions, and if his magical talent was recognized, admission would be entirely possible. He was lost in thought, trying to figure out what exactly he could gain by entering the magic academy of this world, and a thin bead of sweat revealed his inner tension. Then the young man stood up abruptly in front of the seated, long-haired woman and firmly declared that he intended to enroll. That moment, he thought that even the slightest chance to become stronger was worth grabbing. Walking up to the window, he clenched his fist and promised himself that this time he would prove his superiority to the entire world, mentally asking the Demon King to wait. However, looking up at the sky, he again thought about what step he should take next. Meanwhile, the image of the white-haired sage surfaced in his memory, reminding him that he had been reincarnated to hunt the future Demon King and was now living as a boy named Renstrain, carefully considering his mission. The narrative clarified, after 5 centuries, magic became inaccessible to the majority, and only women, especially those endowed with special abilities, were able to use it, which one of them confidently confirmed while magical silhouettes flickered behind her. He realized with a grim sense that men were barred from witchcraft and that magic itself was in decline, and this realization only strengthened his resolve. A memory flashed back to the moment when a chance spell had allowed him to gain the upper hand against Sister Alum, and then a flurry of successive wind blows swept across the field. The father couldn't believe that the young man was using magic, and the mother explained that the technique was a rare, mid-level technique distinguished by its high complexity and rare use. Left alone with his thoughts, he calculated that he had about 10 years left before entering the senior level of the academy, and realized that he had to grow independently during this time. Soon a little girl hesitantly approached him, calling out to her older brother as he silently leaned against a tree and watched her. He turned around in surprise when Eliza grabbed his hand and excitedly informed him that someone had fallen nearby. A withered, hooded figure lay on the ground, and an alarming voice announced that a lich stood before them. It then became clear that this lich was the king of the undead, wielding magic so powerful that he could single-handedly wipe out an entire village. He noted with alarm that in his past life this creature had not been his enemy, but now that his own power had weakened, the situation had become much more dangerous. He quickly ordered Eliza to retreat, wondering how the monsters could get so close to the city, and she called out to him in confusion, "On-chan." The young man looked closely at the lying figure and guessed that it looked weakened. Gathering his courage, he reminded himself that the first blow often decides the outcome of a battle. And finally, he stopped abruptly in front of a strange body on the ground, from which came a piercing and ominous sound. He started warily and asked what that strange sound was that suddenly cut through the silence. Then his gaze fell on the lying skeleton, who suddenly admitted that he was dying of hunger, and this confession sounded almost pitiful. The young man was again taken aback when he heard the bony figure repeat that he had nothing to replenish his strength with and was extremely exhausted. After this, the creature with a skull instead of a face apologized to the children for asking to share magic, explaining that it had not been able to replenish its energy reserves for several days and was at its limit. Ren firmly stated that he had no intention of causing harm, even if it was a monster, while his mother came closer, visibly nervous and at a loss for words. Meanwhile, Eliza quietly confessed to her brother that she wanted to help this pathetic creature, and he cautiously asked whether it was really a dangerous monster in front of them. She looked up at him with a pleading look and said that they couldn't just leave him to die while asking for support. In response, the skeleton in the cloak happily thanked them, and the children admitted with relief that they had already thought the worst, but now the threat had passed. Eliza was pleased to see that Skeleton-san was feeling better, while Ren still felt a little embarrassed, realizing that he had helped a creature from the darkness. He, introducing himself as L, explained that his current appearance was the result of magical research, but that he was originally human and had no intention of attacking his benefactors. Ren wondered if his research would ever be complete, while Eliza listened in silence, and the hooded figure replied that human life was too short to master all magic. Under a vault covered in symbols, Al thoughtfully recounted how, having become a demon and overcome death itself, he had gained far greater power than he had in his human body, and noted that he had not had such conversations for centuries. Ren introduced himself politely, and Eliza, smiling shyly, said that she had recently turned 4 years old, marveling at his long life. She then noticed a bird perched on the skeleton's head and asked if it was his pet, but Al asked her not to interrupt while he spoke. Ren added that the bird had only recently started following them, as if it had chosen their company itself. The skeleton raised his hands and noted that their new companion did not look dangerous, although the situation remained unusual. The young man was a little confused when the bird suddenly asked the young lady's name, and he hesitated, not expecting such an address. Then Ren firmly declared that he was not a girl at all, but a man, and asked to remember this. L, with the bird on his head, chuckled and advised against calling him a boy, to which Ren dubiously asked if they really considered him just young Ren-kun. Finally, the skeleton stated that the dark-haired man would be the perfect subject for the experiment, and the man skeptically retorted that it was unlikely to work, wondering what it meant to be a rare magic user. The hooded figure explained that magic was divided into 6 attributes controlled by spirits, adding that the dark attribute was only accessible to a few demons, not humans. Ren thought about the boundary he had failed to reach in his past life and carefully asked if his interlocutor had transformed from a human into a lich specifically for the sake of mastering dark magic. The skeleton calmly explained that only by becoming a lich could one understand the truth that humans were actually capable of using the dark attribute. The young man was surprised and admitted that he had never heard of such a thing before, involuntarily reacting with a short exclamation in response to the remark from the side. The mother, meanwhile, explained that magic was invisible to the eye and was awakened through the power of the spirits associated with each attribute, holding a staff with a shining sphere. The hooded figure added that dark magic draws energy from the spirits of darkness, which are closer to demons, making its nature a poor fit with human nature. Ren seriously noted that there was a barrier between the races, dictated by conditions, but he did not believe it was insurmountable if enough effort was put in. The skeleton continued that the demon's claims about the impossibility of teaching people were just a lie, and if magic were studied using their method, then despite all the disagreements, it was still feasible. The young man concentrated and thought that if what was said was true, he had a rare chance before him, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. After that, he looked up at the skeleton with a bird on his head and asked curiously if he would agree to teach him the dark attribute. Al acknowledged his debt to them, but reminded them that mastering the art requires not only innate talent, but also tremendous effort. Ren confidently declared that he was ready to go through this path to become stronger, and Eliza watched the conversation closely. Then the hooded skeleton announced that Ren had changed a lot, and from today on he would become his disciple. Suddenly, the girl animatedly declared that she also wanted to learn magic, which caught her brother off guard. Ren warned against overworking Eliza due to her fragile health, but Al asked if she would like to become his apprentice, and she happily agreed. She added that she had been feeling better lately, although she hesitated, as if she wanted to say something more. Then Eliza firmly stated that she did not intend to be a burden to Ren and Master L, and wanted to find her own path. Raising her shining eyes, she asked to be allowed to study with her brother. After that, she gratefully thanked him for the chance, and Ren, slightly embarrassed, still accepted her decision. Finally, the skeleton noted with disbelief that taking a human boy as an apprentice was an extremely unusual step, but it seemed there was no other way. A month had already passed since the training began. Ren, Eliza, and their mother stood on the grass in front of a wooden dummy, ready to check the progress made. Eliza concentrated and cast the healing spell Light of Healing, after which a soft glow passed over the mannequin, restoring 150 units of durability. In front of them was a magical doll, set up in a field overlooking the city. Its specialty was that it accurately measured the power of spells and was highly resistant to magic. The hooded figure noted that the girl showed a particular affinity for restorative spells, explaining that a normal mage could reach approximately 100 units, while an experienced one could increase the figure to 200. Ren inquired whether healers were rare, and the mentor noted her success with approval, calling the result impressive. The young man stood next to the small creature on his head, and the skeleton emphasized that such a gift was valuable and gentle in nature, which was especially suitable for the kind Eliza, who listened attentively to his words. Ren listened attentively to the explanations, while the girl admitted with slight pride that she really did have something special in her powers. She happily added that all this time she received support from those around her, and now she feels truly happy. Ren patted her head approvingly, and she responded with a beaming smile. He then announced that he intended to try the dark attribute since the theory had already been mastered, and Eliza cautiously noted that an attempt was possible, but the time was probably not yet ripe. Over the past month, he had been undergoing rigorous training under his sister, acclimating his body to dark magic, and now he was once again looking at the wooden mannequin in front of him. He realized that his mentor's words had come true. He was practicing the spells he had received from the demon, which had seemed impossible in his past life. The skeleton advised not to lose heart if results do not come immediately, adding that it took him years to master this art. Ren felt a surge of confidence, knowing that his recent efforts had allowed him to take a step forward and reach a new level. Gathering his will, he shouted the name of the dark spear spell and abruptly threw the spinning sphere forward, the impact sending a powerful shock through the ground. After the attack, he admitted that controlling the power was more difficult than expected and had hoped for a greater effect, while Eliza happily praised him, calling him an amazing older brother. Suddenly, both he and she became wary as the skeleton demanded to know what was going on, and Ren quickly called out to his sister. They called the mentor, who was already leaving, declaring that since he lacked confidence, he should return to the mountains. 2 months later, a cheerful Eliza again directed the Light of Healing into the mannequin, bringing the recovery to 230 units. Meanwhile, Ren concentrated on using the magic Fire Fang storm attack, and the dummy shuddered from the impact, receiving 999 points of damage under his determined gaze. The boy with the bird on his shoulder asked the mentor how he assessed their progress, addressing him as a master, and the skeleton replied with satisfaction that the result was excellent and they had no reason to be dissatisfied. The girl happily thanked him for his guidance, and Ren, standing next to her, smiled, feeling the lightness of the moment as the bird settled calmly on his shoulder. The skeleton congratulated them on receiving the license, as if summing up the stage they had passed, and Ren involuntarily asked again, not expecting such a quick confession. The mentor then reported that the young man had mastered in 3 months everything that others had learned for hundreds of years, and admitted that he had nothing more to pass on. Ren looked up in surprise as the hooded figure turned to Eliza, the bird on his shoulder calling out loudly to the teacher as they stood in the middle of a field overlooking the city. Eliza responded softly that she would be as diligent as her brother and confidently promised to become an outstanding healer capable of saving lives. Ren became wary again when the bird suddenly asked if he could be trusted with the child, as if it was something important. The mentor noticed that the creature was unusual and was drawn only to Ren, clearly feeling a special affection for him. A close-up of the bird's eye revealed a depth and intelligence that was completely alien to the average bird. The boy asked if the baby had been given a name, and the skeleton admitted that he still hadn't been named. The bird chirped loudly, and someone explained that the name Nia meant sky in an ancient language. The hooded figure nodded approvingly, calling the choice a good one. Ren, standing next to Eliza, noted that if they took Nia with them, Elle would have to be left alone. The skeleton calmly replied that there was no need to worry about that. Then his voice became serious. Unfortunately, he had no more time left. Ren and Eliza looked up as dark smoke and sparks swirled around the mentor's hands, and he announced that his end was coming today. The young man thought about how Eliza had achieved what he had not been able to in his past life, and he realized that he still had many questions to which he would never receive answers. The skeleton asked Ren why he was so obsessed with power at such a young age, and there was a seriousness in his tone. Ren explained with concern that it was about settling accounts with the Demon King, although he knew that no one would believe such a story. The bone-faced skeleton noted that Ren probably had his own reasons and asked him to remember one important instruction. The hooded skeleton quietly advised anyone seeking power not to isolate themselves in solitude, but to seek connections with others, otherwise the path will turn into emptiness. Ren, with the bird on his shoulder, asked thoughtfully what relation bonds could have to power, his voice filled with both curiosity and concern. The mentor admitted that he had once chosen solitude and made a serious mistake, warning the young man not to repeat it. Then the skeleton suddenly warned of a gigantic magical power that should be treated with extreme caution, and Ren became wary, not expecting such a turn of events. The narrative specified that in recent years, a strange energy had been felt colossal, capable of consuming the entire world, and its presence was impossible to ignore. The young man asked why they were revealing this to him now, and an invisible voice asked in response whether he really wanted to become stronger. The clenched fist became a symbol of decision, and the voice added that how this power was used would determine not only his fate, but the future of all humanity. After these words, the figure with the bony face announced that it was time to part. Ren and Eliza stood shoulder to shoulder, looking up at the sky, where the hooded skeleton thanked them for meeting before disappearing. Later, the young man walked slowly down the corridor, thinking about what had been said, that power without connections could turn into emptiness. He recalled his previous life, where he had walked forward alone as a renowned sage, and wondered if that monstrous energy really came from the Demon King. Meanwhile, he noticed that Eliza looked paler than usual and awkwardly called out to her, and she tried to smile, hiding her weakness. Suddenly, he called her name and dropped to his knees, picking up her limp body. Her skin was flushed with heat, her limbs felt numb, and her breathing became heavy and uneven. The doctor in the white coat said that it was probably Orozo's disease, and these words made the three people standing nearby freeze. Someone quickly supported Ellen as she staggered, and the girl next to her covered her mouth, unable to hide her shock. Ren looked up at the man in glasses and asked anxiously what this disease was. The doctor explained that the disease was rare, more often affected women, was believed to be related to magic, and was accompanied by persistent high fever and numbness, ultimately leading to death. Eliza, gathering her remaining strength, asked about treatment, but the doctor was forced to admit that there was no cure for Aloro's disease yet, and Ren listened to this, feeling a growing heaviness. The young man thought in despair that she could really die, because just recently she had been training with enthusiasm and using healing spells, and this contrast only increased the fear in his heart. The tall man tried to calm the worried woman, assuring her that there was still hope, while the surprised girl and small child watched the conversation in tense silence. He then explained that in a dungeon outside the city, in its very heart, a legendary elixir was kept that could save Eliza. The man with the scar on his face firmly added that there was no other way out, despite the danger of the dungeon, and promised to hire adventurers and personally obtain the potion. Eliza tried to object, insisting that she could not remain inactive while a loved one was suffering, but Ren watched silently, and the man turned to Alam, demanding prudence. Then the young man resolutely declared that he would go too, and the adult's serious gaze met his stubbornness, while the girl quietly called out to Ren. The man assured her that he would definitely take care of the elixir, and advised her to stay close to Eliza in case her condition worsened, and she listened, barely breathing. After this, he ordered his two companions to look after her, and they went down the corridor, while the woman and the boy followed them with their eyes. The mother raised her hand and asked Alam to be careful, but he only nodded silently, standing in the semi-dark passage. Ren thought with concern about Eliza's fragility and wondered if her magical practice had caused the illness, recalling the doctor's words about the possible connection between the illness and magic. Then he felt irritated. No matter how much he thought about the Demon King and his own strength, now he was powerless to protect even his family. The mother gently asked Eliza to be patient a little longer, explaining that the father and the others had gone to get effective medicine, and the girl was having difficulty breathing, lying in bed. At that moment, Ren heard a faint whisper, which sounded like an appeal to his older brother, and he raised his head in surprise. The woman sitting by the bed tried to reassure her son that everything would be fine, while Eliza, wearing a fever-reducing bandage, looked exhausted but calm. With a slight smile and closed eyes, she promised that she would overcome the disease herself, with the healing magic she learned from Master L, and become someone who supports others. She added that she had always received help from those around her, and was therefore happy to have the chance to give back. Ren squeezed her hand tightly and vowed that he would definitely find a way to save her, asking her to wait a little longer. Eliza, blushing slightly, quietly agreed, uttering a short confirmation despite her weakness. Later, Ren apologized to his mother and asked her to take care of his sister, after which he headed for the exit and she called out to him in alarm. Standing at the open door, he decided that ranks and titles no longer mattered if he was unable to protect those who were dear to him now. There were soldiers at the end of the corridor, and Ren considered using the dark magic Master L had taught him to overcome this obstacle. Ren dropped to one knee, concentrated to the limit, and quietly commanded the shadow to move, after which thick, dark streaks spread out beneath him, as if brought to life by his will. The narrative noted that this structure was clearly man-made and did not exist 500 years ago, and the lower the level, the more deadly the monsters living there become. Descending the stone stairs, the young man regretted that he could not explore everything thoroughly, but circumstances forced him to focus only on finding the elixir. Meanwhile, a squad of armored warriors led by a man with a huge sword faced a horde of monsters, while a fair-haired girl stood a little to the side, remaining calm. The exhausted fighters quickly realized that the enemy outnumbered them, and one of them warned the commander that the situation was becoming critical. In the midst of the battle, the commander abruptly ordered Ulam to urgently go for reinforcements, but she, stunned, tried to object. The man with the two-handed sword announced that the passage was temporarily clear and urged the others to move forward. The girl firmly promised to return, and the serious warrior turned to her before the detachment moved further along the brick wall. The leader gritted his teeth, realizing that the monsters had gotten too close to the surface, and decided to break through without delay. Then he shouted an order, and the squad rushed forward decisively, sweeping away everything in its path. At that moment, Ren released the fire lance, and the flaming projectile cut through the space, while a wary warrior in heavy armor stood nearby. The four adventurers froze, trying to comprehend what they had seen, and one of them incredulously suggested that it was a spell. Ren, noticing the familiar silhouette, asked in surprise what she was doing here, looking up at the taller figure. He firmly stated that he had come to help save Eliza, and there was a look of determination on his face. The squad watched in amazement as the man wielded the fire lance, and someone muttered that such a thing was impossible. The armored commander insistently ordered Ren to leave the place, calling it too dangerous, but he calmly replied that he was already capable of standing up for himself. The young man added that he would accompany them as his presence would increase the chances of obtaining the elixir. The girl sharply objected to her father, not accepting his decision, while the armored warrior listened silently, arms crossed, and Ren stood nearby. Eliza angrily declared that such a man would only become a burden, and her words caused both men to exchange worried glances. Then the scarred man admitted that he owed his life to Alamren, and the girl looked up at him, trying to understand the meaning of what he said. Mother urged everyone to work together to increase their chances of success, while Ren stood silently behind the armored warrior, reminding him that Eliza was suffering at that very moment. The girl, maintaining her seriousness, although with noticeable reluctance, acknowledged the need to unite and agreed to allow one of them to accompany the detachment. Someone thanked him and urged his father to speak, but he hesitantly responded with a short confirmation, as if he still had doubts. Soon, a large warrior in armor, breathing heavily, announced that he had found what he was looking for, and behind him stood a joyful girl with 3 companions, noticeably relieved. The young man asked if it really was an elixir, and the warrior, kneeling, confidently declared that with its help, Eliza could be saved. Ren asked if they were taking everything, and the warrior explained that the elixir could only be transported in specially treated vessels, and the girl listened attentively. The young man reflected that 500 years ago, such elixirs seemed almost inexhaustible, but the current era was very different from the previous one. Despite the difficulties, he felt relieved. If the potion was genuine, Eliza would be saved. However, in the open field, Ren in the night suddenly stopped, looking up at the huge roaring dragon, and tension filled the air. The mother, noticeably pale, exclaimed in amazement that it was a dragon in front of them. The young man remembered that once upon a time, green dragons were often exterminated for food, whereas now the enormous creature sat calmly before them. The three men looked at each other in panic. One admitted that he had never heard of a dragon making a lair in the dungeon, and the other was puzzled as to how it had ended up there. Eliza asked irritably why everyone was so confused and pointed to someone nearby while Ren silently tried to comprehend what was happening. She, unable to hold back her tears, exclaimed that she had finally obtained the elixir, clutching her head with her hands in despair. The group of people, including the tall warrior and the trembling girl, instinctively retreated, while Ren thought that the creatures that had once been hunted for food were now mortally feared. The knight shouted decisively that he would detain the enemy and ordered that the elixir be immediately delivered to Eliza. The girl anxiously called out to her father, who confidently agreed, while the man in the pointed hat watched silently from the side. Ren concentrated and cast the ice prison barrier spell, creating a glowing patterned barrier of ice. Standing among the giant crystals, he urged the others, insisting that they deliver the elixir to his sister as quickly as possible. And yet, looking at the ruined, chaotic landscape around him, Ren admitted to himself that what was happening seemed strange and disturbing. The doctor confidently declared that Orozo's illness had completely receded thanks to the elixir, and the fair-haired woman did not hide her amazement, admitting that they had managed to obtain it after all. The tall man let out a sigh of relief, noting how glad he was to hear that, while Eliza remained thoughtfully silent, a little girl standing next to her, and a dark-haired young man sitting a little further away. She noticed Ren's expression and said that he was making that face again, and he asked again, confused, not understanding what she was talking about. In fact, he felt a great sense of relief and could hardly hold back his tears. Eliza asked him in surprise what was happening to him, noticing the change in his behavior. Ren quietly admitted that he was glad that they had managed to save her while she was resting in bed, her mother standing next to her with a grateful look. A week later, the park near the large fountain was once again filled with tranquility, benches were shaded by trees, and a majestic building towered in the background. Eliza greeted her brother cheerfully with a bright good morning, and he said her name back with a slight hesitation. The mother noticed that she was pleased with the improvement in her health, but still asked her not to run around the house, and the girl quietly apologized. Ren said that after the elixir, he felt great and it made him happy, while Eliza admitted that she still managed to run, and he confirmed this with a smile. He calmly noted that the potion had worked even better than expected, judging by her condition. Eliza joyfully said that she felt an extraordinary lightness, as if wings had grown on her back. Ren watched with pleasure as the girl twirled in her dress and was genuinely pleased with her energy. He remembered that he was reincarnated to defeat the Demon King and strive to become the strongest, but now he realized that the desire to protect Eliza was stronger than his previous ambitions. With his eyes closed, he realized that this feeling had not changed even now. The young man quietly said the word bonds, and the little girl asked again if he was talking to his older brother. Sitting on the grass, he said that he seemed to have understood a little of the meaning of Master L's words, and Eliza, with a bow behind her back, asked who he was talking about. Above them, a clear sky with rare clouds stretched out, and in the air there was a determination to protect loved ones and at the same time become the strongest. The scarred man informed Ren and Eliza that the carriage was on its way, and the girl smiled calmly as the horse-drawn carriage approached. The young man thought that several years had passed since the incident with Eliza, and now he was 15. The man reminded them both that the day of the entrance exam had finally arrived and urged them to give it their all. Eliza happily said goodbye to her parents, announcing that she was leaving, and Ren stood calmly next to her. She excitedly told her brother that the long-awaited moment had arrived, and he quietly responded with a short cry, as if realizing the importance of what was happening. The carriage stopped at a majestic building. An adult and a girl stood next to each other, and in my thoughts I heard that this day had finally come. Ren and Eliza stood frozen in front of the Grand Elenium Academy of Magic. He carefully examined the facade, and she admired its immense scale. The young man remembered that this was the world's main school, created to educate outstanding magicians, and hoped to gain new knowledge here. He listened attentively as his sister insisted that the first thing he needed to do was pass the exam successfully. She then tried to encourage him, assuring him that he could do it, even though she admitted that she felt less capable. Ren touched her head gently, instilling confidence. With a slight smile, he added that he vouched for her success. He continued to smile, and Eliza laughed, declaring that she really did feel calm now, After the event she experienced, she seemed to blossom and promised to make every effort to transfer to the middle department of the academy with her parents' permission. The mother asked with a serious expression why Aram Nisan was here. Ren was surprised to see classes on the day of the transfer exam, and she explained that she was already a student and had come to support Eliza. The mother wished them success, and the girl warmly thanked them for their support. Eliza sternly warned her brother not to disgrace House Stroheim, and he nodded awkwardly in response. Mother walked confidently forward, saying that she would watch from the stands while Ren and Aram remained behind, silently looking around. The young man thought that his sister had not changed at all in her attitude towards him, but she explained with a smile that this was how she showed her support. Eliza asked him what was bothering him, and he replied that everything was fine. Meanwhile, in the courtyard, one girl felt the strange presence of another and wondered if her imagination was playing tricks on her. From the heights, a view opened up onto the third training arena of the Elenium Academy of Magic. A crowd had already gathered around the ring, and the stands were gradually filling with spectators. In the auditorium, the girls noticed the presence of the young man and began to whisper, wondering if he had also come to take the transfer exam. Ren noted to himself that he was the only man among the examinees, while Eliza noticed the huge number of participants around her. A woman in uniform announced the start of the first stage, explaining that it would take the form of a magical duel between the examinees, while other employees in similar attire listened attentively. Then a clarification was given. If a participant is pushed outside the circle, he is considered eliminated, and observers have the right to stop the fight if they deem continuation impossible. They further explained that only the winners would advance to the second stage, while half of the participants would be eliminated immediately, emphasizing the rigor of the selection process. It was also announced that the exams for the middle division would be held in the Western Ring, and for the senior division in the Eastern Ring, and that when a number was called, the participant was required to enter the circle. Ren watched intently as the announcer called out the next pair, contestant number 11 and 12, thus opening the match. The employee, holding a document in her hands, loudly noted that number 11 was an unprecedented male examinee. The mother, looking intently at the arena, asked if anyone had come here for empty bravado or a hidden purpose. A warning came from the stands. If the opponent was seriously injured, the speaker should not be blamed. Ren considered that he would have to act carefully, as he couldn't unleash his full strength in such circumstances. Meanwhile, Eliza demonstrated the fire spear, releasing a flaming shaft from her staff that struck the ground. Ren watched as the announcer called out numbers 11 and 12 again, and the crowd and onlookers prepared to begin. The woman in uniform repeated the number 11, again emphasizing the unusualness of the man among the examinees. His mother, without taking her eyes off the ring, again asked about his intentions, as if doubting the sincerity of what was happening. A sharp remark came from the side: if the rival gets hurt, the responsibility should not be shifted, because a collision with a man is already a risk. Ren reminded himself again that he had to keep his power under control and not go at full force. A scream was heard below, the crowd shuddered, and someone asked in horror if the participant lying in the arena had died. The mother sharply ordered the flames to be extinguished with water, and Eliza, with a staff in her hand, was about to object, but suddenly noticed something strange and froze thoughtfully. Ren calmly explained to his opponent that the figure lying in the arena was merely an earthen decoy he had created, and she listened, still not hiding her anxiety. He stood up with confidence when the announcer called him the winner, and although he silently regretted not having had time to test a few more moves, he accepted the result without protest. The mother noted with concern that the very fact that a man had used magic had already shocked the audience, and then added that it was also a double spell. Ren demonstrated how he could form an earthen doppelganger while simultaneously using wind to instantly move behind his opponent, and Eliza mentally acknowledged how advanced these techniques were for a transfer student. Someone in the crowd wondered who this mysterious young man was, while another noted that her fight in the middle section was already over. The woman with the tail announced the next match between contestants number 55 and 56, and the girl in the dress stepped forward, while two employees supported her with shouts. She quietly advised herself to remain calm and act as usual, encouraging herself in a soft tone. Eliza erected a sacred shield to deflect a rock shot that her tailed opponent threw with a loud shout of the spell's name. Without wasting any time, the same girl released the fire spear, and the flaming projectile rushed forward. She suddenly rose into the air, surprising Ren, and the explanation stated that the elixir she had taken had unexpectedly enhanced her physical abilities. Eliza released the light arrow with concentration, and Ren couldn't help but become wary, seeing the speed of the attack. The judge declared number 56 the winner because her opponent had stepped outside the circle, and one of the girls dropped to the ground while the other stood nearby. The mother quickly asked if everything was okay with him and if there were any hidden injuries. She quietly replied that she felt fine and thanked him for his concern, and he noted with relief that he was glad to hear it. Ren praised Eliza for her performance, calling her big sister with respect, and she responded with a confident smile, adjusting the bow in her hair. Those around her noted that she performed well, and 2 spectators suggested that she was HAREM's younger sister, and that such a result was natural for the Strine family. The 3 observers discussed what was happening. One was surprised by Renstrine's abilities, the other mentioned that the young man was indeed capable of using magic. HAREM, looking with a cold expression, mentally noted that her impudent younger brother, only a man, dared to challenge her. The girl with long hair quietly remarked that the situation was probably difficult for HAREM, who despised men, and her companion added that it was better not to bring up the topic in her presence. Finally, the announcement was made that the first stage had ended, and the winners were directed to the second examination site, while the crowd began to disperse into the open square. The man addressed the assembled group and explained that the second stage would require forming a squad of 3 people and descending to the 3rd floor of the dungeon, where they would need to obtain proof of passage by warning about monsters and traps. The strict examiner then added that the test was administered jointly to the middle and senior divisions. Age did not matter, but if one participant dropped out, the entire group would be considered a failure. Ren and the 3 girls reacted with surprise, one of them incredulously asking if responsibility really fell on everyone without exception. In the academy courtyard, they continued to explain that the ability to work in a group was fundamentally important here, and this was precisely what would be tested, while a large crowd of students hung on every word. They then warned that the dungeon would be monitored for safety, but entering without full determination was dangerous, so a team should be assembled first. Ren figured they needed 3 to get through, and if he teamed up with Eliza, they'd need 1 more member. He considered the risk of making the wrong choice, realizing that someone else's mistake would lead to everyone's failure, and therefore decided to approach the decision with the utmost caution. One of the girls recoiled in surprise and, with slight caution, refused, asking if he was a man. The young man wondered if they were deliberately avoiding him, while Eliza confidently decided that those around her simply did not realize how talented her older brother was, watching the student walking in front of her. Soon, one of the girls politely asked him if he would like to join them. She calmly added that she had no objection to such a union. Eliza introduced herself and her brother, and Renstrine responded politely, expressing his pleasure at meeting them. Mother confidently walked forward and said that they should move towards the entrance to the dungeon, and Ren and Eliza followed her. The girl with the big bow asked the name of her new companion, but the one with the ponytail dryly remarked that the union was temporary and there was no need for formalities. Eliza insisted that introducing herself was necessary, but Ren tried to soften the situation, considering it unnecessary. However, she asked again with a smile for the name, and Ren awkwardly looked away without intervening. The girl, with a worried expression, identified herself as Alicia Foltz and asked if that was enough now. Eliza happily addressed her by name and asked them to take care of each other in the dungeon. Alicia said she was 15, and the girl with the bow asked if she was older than her. The long-haired student added that, despite being 13 years old, she preferred to be called Alicia Chan, and her interlocutor indifferently noted that she didn't care what they called her. Ren noted that it was rare to meet a swordsman who was also a mage, and Eliza added enthusiastically that the ability to wield a sword and magic at the same time was impressive. Alicia calmly stated that she had no intention of getting close to anyone, and that it was enough for her to simply pass the exam. The young man sighed mentally, realizing that with such a character she would cause a lot of trouble, and anxiously wiped away an imaginary drop of sweat. Eliza admitted that it was her first time entering the dungeon, while Ren reminded her that the last time he went down there was for the elixir, standing next to a serious woman in armor. Meanwhile, the woman with long hair announced the disqualification of numbers 16, 32, and 65, and the 3 exhausted girls breathed heavily, admitting that they had not coped with the influx of monsters. Ren noticed that he too felt the tension, as this was his first official test in the dungeon, and the girl behind him admitted that her previous visit was only related to the search for the elixir. Soon he, Eliza, and another participant sank to the ground, catching their breath, realizing that it was not easy to cope with so many monsters, and the disqualification announcement sounded again. The girl with the large bow nervously responded affirmatively to the order, and the woman in uniform invited the next group inside. Ren warned Eliza to be careful. It was dark underfoot, and she cheerfully agreed, carefully examining the interior space. Suddenly, Alicia stopped abruptly and ordered everyone to freeze, and Ren asked what exactly she had noticed. A gloved hand pointed forward, and someone remarked wryly that they seemed to be being met by a whole delegation. Ren spotted goblins ahead, and Alicia warned that there were more than 10 of them. He thought that he could destroy them with 1 blow, but that would not give Eliza experience, and besides, he wanted to see Alicia's abilities. Ren offered to cover their backs, but the girl firmly refused, saying that it was not necessary. Someone gripped the hilt of the sword tighter, deciding that this was enough for a test of this level. Ren watched with wide eyes as she cut through the goblins in an instant, trying to figure out what kind of power could have made it happen so quickly. And then he realized that even at their first meeting he had felt a special aura emanating from her blade, and now he understood that the source of the power lay precisely in this sword.